Then on Sports Central, we go over a college football game preview and prediction on the Week 9 matchup between the Illinois Fighting Illini and the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Huge matchup for both these teams coming up here in Week 9. You got Illinois, who is the surprise team of the Big Ten so far this season. They're ranked 17th in the country right now. They're 6-1, and they're alone at the top of the Big Ten West heading into Week 9. And they're taking on Nebraska, who has had a roller coaster of a season to this point. They fired their head coach, Scott Frost, back in early September. And this team, since then, they haven't been terrible. They have improved over the course of the season to this point. So this is definitely a huge opportunity for Nebraska to take on a top 20 opponent, and Illinois potentially pull off a big upset. We'll be going over a full game preview and prediction on this match for today. Starting out with their team trends. Illinois, they beat Minnesota 26-14 back a couple of weeks ago. Both teams are coming off of byes heading into this matchup. So that is something to keep in mind here. Both teams have got plenty of time to prepare for this matchup, which is a pretty crucial one for both these teams. I mean, there's a lot at stake in this matchup. Illinois is a team that is, once again, I mean, they're alone at the top of the Big Ten West right now, which is crazy. I mean, I don't think anyone would have imagined that in the offseason. But, I mean, Illinois is a big-time contender in the Big Ten West right now. And so for them, in a division that's pretty competitive yet pretty terrible, I mean, this is a huge game for Illinois. And for Nebraska, of course, I mean, their hopes of the Big Ten are, or at least the Big Ten West, are still alive, believe it or not. This team is 2-2 in conference. I mean, at this point for Nebraska, if they can get to 6 to 7 wins, get to a bowl game, that is definitely the goal for Nebraska. And this is, I almost think, a must-win for Nebraska if they want to get to a bowl game this season. So it's a big-time matchup for both these teams. Nebraska just lost to Purdue. Now, once again, that was a couple of weeks ago, 37-43, so a shootout there. Nebraska hung in there and kept it close, but they took the loss there in the end. They're 3-4 on the season, and they have won 2 of their past 3. So they do have a couple of conference wins on the schedule to this point. ESPN on Saturday, October 29th in Lincoln, Nebraska. Kickoff is 2:30 p.m. Central. Spread's going Illinois by 7.5. So the Illini are favored by about a touchdown in this matchup. Over-under is 50.5. And the FPI is also going Illinois 68.3%. So the Illini are favored by a decent margin in this matchup, about a touchdown, which is somewhat expected. Illinois has also won the past 2 matchups against Nebraska, even though Nebraska leads the overall series 13-5, and they've also won 3 out of the past 5. Stat comparison for this one: Illinois 80th in points per game. They're first in points allowed. This is the top team in the FBS in points allowed per game this season. They're allowing an average of 8.9 points a game, which is pretty outstanding. I mean, you think about Georgia and Alabama and teams with great defenses at the top of the nation right now, and you got Illinois up here. I mean, Illinois is in first heading into late October. Who would have expected that? But this defense is, they got a good defense here. This team is, once again, allowing an average of just about 9 points a game. They're 98th in pass yards a game, 19th in rush yards, so a pretty outstanding rush offense here. And rushing game in the Illini. Of course, they got Chase Brown, who has over 1,000 yards of rushing so far this season. And they are 5th in pass yards allowed and then 2nd in rush yards allowed. So once again, this defense has been great, to say the least, so far this season. As for Nebraska, 57th in points per game, 108th in points allowed. So this team is allowing quite a few points on defense, an average of 31. They are 26th in pass yards a game, with averaging nearly 270, which is a pretty good stat there. Of course, Casey Thompson does have nearly 2,000 pass yards on the season, 11 touchdowns, does have 8 interceptions, so he's got a decent amount of turnovers this season, and that's something that does need to be improved. They're 72nd in rush yards a game, and then for yards allowed, they're 126th in passing. It's basically 5th or 6th to the worst in pass yards allowed, and then they're 109th in rushing defense. So defensively, Nebraska has just been poor this season, which is polar opposite last season. Last season, it was just that Nebraska's offense was so bad, but their defense was great. I mean, that's what kept Nebraska in so many close games, and they were shockingly 3-9 at the end of the day, when Nebraska could have been a 7 to 8 win team, maybe even higher last season, but that's just the way that went for Nebraska. This defense, they've been poor at points this season. They were impressive, at least against Rutgers, but then again, Rutgers is a terrible team on offense, so that is something to keep in mind. But this offense has been able to win a couple of decent games this season. Of course, most notably, that was against Indiana when they scored 35 on them. Recent matchups: Illinois, they beat Minnesota 26-14. Close game against Iowa, but they got the win 9-6. Beat Wisconsin 34-10. That was kind of the win that started to catch some glances there was them beating Wisconsin on the road. Of course, Wisconsin has disappointed big time so far this season, but still, I mean, going on the road to Camp Randall, that is a big time win there. Beat Chattanooga 31-0, beat Virginia 24-3. So you can see how great this defense has been, allowing next to nothing as far as points. And for Nebraska, they lost to Purdue 37-43, beat Rutgers 14-13, beat Indiana 35-21, lost to Oklahoma 14-49, and of course lost to Georgia Southern 42-45. That was the last game of Scott Frost's tenure with Nebraska, and rightfully so. I mean, losing to Georgia Southern at home in what was a night game, I mean, that was, just a terrible loss there. But key points for this one, Illinois 6-1. Once again, they got an outstanding running back in Chase Brown, which I feel like is a tough matchup for the Cornhuskers. Nebraska had trouble against Purdue, and Purdue's backfield, especially Maccabee, who had his way no problem against Nebraska when they played. So that is something I'm concerned about. If Nebraska can stop the run in this game, I mean, I like Nebraska's chances, but I mean, Chase Brown is a better running back than Purdue has in Maccabee, so that's something to keep in mind. Brown has rushed for over 1,000 yards to this point in the season. And of course, for the Illini, their defense is pretty underrated, I'd say, as well. I mean, they are the top defense in the country in points allowed with only 8.9, just about 9. So that is something to keep in mind here. And of course, Tommy DeVito, he's been good to this point in the season with over 1,400 pass yards, 10 touchdowns, over 2 picks. Not a bad start to the season for DeVito, who was the Syracuse transfer quarterback. And for Nebraska, they have improved, I would say, since the firing of Scott Frost. And I mean, I like Mickey Joseph. He's been doing, I think, a great job with Nebraska. I mean, the past 3 games, the past 3 conference games, they've showed a lot of fight, and they've won 2 of them out of the past 3 and almost beat Purdue. I mean, they came really close there in the end. So, I mean, this team has improved, and this is a huge opportunity here for Nebraska going up against a ranked opponent, a top 20 team. It's been a while since Nebraska has been a ranked opponent. I mean, they came extremely close so many times last season, just couldn't get it done. So it's going to be very interesting to see if Nebraska can get it done against a team in Illinois that I think is a great team for sure, but I still think at this point in the season, they are a beatable team. So that's something to keep in mind. And of course, for Illinois, you're going up against the top receiver in the country here to this point in the season in Trey Palmer. He's got nearly 800 yards of receiving, 5 touchdowns on the season. He is leading the nation in receiving yards in the receiving position so far this season. So that is something to keep in mind heading into this matchup. You got one of the top rushers in the country in Chase Brown, one of the top receivers in the country in Trey Palmer. It's a pretty intriguing matchup here coming up here in Week 9. Let's get to the prediction here for Illinois and Nebraska. Yeah, this is a tough prediction, one of the toughest ones of the week, but I'm going to go with Nebraska to get the win. 27-24, they upset Illinois and give them their 2nd loss of the season. And of course, Illinois' other loss came to Indiana on the road, which was a pretty shocking loss in retrospect, considering Illinois is one of the top teams in the Big Ten right now. But Nebraska being at home in this matchup, coming off of a bye, I like Nebraska to get the win here, 27-24. I think the Cornhuskers, once again, they've showed a lot of fight the past 3 games. They lost to Purdue. It was a close loss, but they still scored 37, and they kept it. I mean, they just did not go away in that game, even though Purdue led for the majority of the game, if not the entire game. But yeah, Nebraska, 55%. I'm going to go with the Cornhuskers here in a close one for sure, 27-24. And I mean, it's tough to pick the over-under here because Illinois is a defense that's allowed an average of 9 points a game. But on the flip side, you got Nebraska, who could definitely turn this game into a potential shootout if they can get things going on offense. So, of course, you have the Cornhuskers, who haven't been good on defense, allowing 31 points. That's why I say that. But, I mean, I will take the over for this one, barely. The over-under is 50.5, and I feel like if Nebraska does win this game, more than likely we'll see the over. But if you're going to take Illinois to win this one, honestly, you might as well just take the under because I don't see Illinois scoring a whole lot of points in this one. Well, I mean, it's definitely possible. Going up against a Nebraska defense has allowed 31, but Illinois is a stronger team on defense than they are on offense. That is something to keep in mind in this matchup. So it's pretty tough picking the over-under if we're being honest here, but I will take Nebraska to get the win in a close one, 27-24. But that said, let me know your thoughts in the comments below on this matchup, and I appreciate you guys watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.